It was a cool night in Los Angeles on March 9, 1997. The streets were alive with the sound of engines and music, but silence was about to fall upon the world of hip-hop. At the intersection of Wilshire Boulevard and South Fairfax Avenue, a dark sedan pulled alongside a green GMC Suburban. Inside the larger vehicle sat the king of New York, Christopher Wallace, known to the world as the Notorious B.I.G. In mere seconds, the air shattered with gunfire, and a legend was taken from the world, leaving a void that has never been filled. This was not just a murder, it was a cultural shifting point that remains unsolved to this day, leaving detectives and fans asking the same questions for decades. Christopher Wallace was more than just a rapper, he was a storyteller who painted vivid pictures of life in Brooklyn. His rise to fame was meteoric, transforming him from a young man on the street corners of Bed-Stuy into a global icon. With his debut album Ready to Die, he shifted the focus of the music industry back to the East Coast. He possessed a charisma that was undeniable and a lyrical flow that was unmatched. However heavy is the head that wears the crown, and his rapid ascent brought him into the center of a coastal rivalry that had turned dangerously violent. The stakes were no longer just about record sales, they were about pride and territory. The tension between the East Coast and West Coast music scenes had reached a boiling point by 1996. The murder of Tupac Shakur in Las Vegas, just 6 months prior to the trip to Los Angeles, cast a long and ominous shadow over the industry. Many people on the streets and in the media speculated that the death of Tupac would lead to retaliation. Despite the warnings and the palpable tension in the air, Christopher Wallace decided to travel to California. He wanted to promote his upcoming album Life After Death and prove that he could transcend the coastal beef. He believed that music should unite rather than divide, but the atmosphere in Los Angeles was thick with hostility. Christopher Wallace arrived in Los Angeles in February 1997 to film a music video for his song Hypnotize and to attend the Soul Train Music Awards. The trip started well, with the artist enjoying the California weather and the company of his friends and associates. He was traveling with a large entourage, including his close friend and label boss Sean Combs. They moved through the city in a convoy of luxury SUVs, hoping that their presence would be seen as a peace offering or at least a business move. However, the reception was mixed, with some local crowds jeering him during public appearances. The threat level was high and security was tight, but perhaps not tight enough for what was waiting in the shadows. On the evening of March 8th, Christopher Wallace attended a star-studded after-party hosted by Vibe magazine at the Petersen Automotive Museum. The event was a celebration of Black music and culture, packed with celebrities and industry executives. The mood inside was celebratory and relaxed, a stark contrast to the tension on the streets outside. Guests mingled and danced, and for a few hours the coastal rivalry seemed to be forgotten. Christopher Wallace was seen smiling and enjoying himself, wearing a suit and looking every bit the successful mogul he had become. It was a moment of triumph before the tragedy, and the last time many of his friends would see him alive. As the party wound down shortly after midnight on March 9th, the fire department shut the event down due to overcrowding. Hundreds of guests poured out onto the sidewalk of Wilshire Boulevard, creating a chaotic scene of cars and people. Christopher Wallace and his entourage prepared to leave in their convoy. He took the front passenger seat of a green GMC Suburban. Sean Combs was in the vehicle ahead of him, and security guards trailed in a Chevrolet Blazer. The mood was still high as they planned to head to a private house party in the Hollywood Hills. The convoy slowly navigated through the crowded street, unaware that they were being watched by eyes filled with malice. The convoy traveled east on Wilshire Boulevard and stopped at a red light at the intersection of South Fairfax Avenue. The streets were busy, with cars leaving the museum and fans trying to catch a glimpse of the stars. The green Suburban was boxed in by the traffic, and the red light held them in place for what felt like an eternity. To the right of the vehicle stood the Petersen Automotive Museum, a massive structure that would become the backdrop for a historic tragedy. It was 12:45 in the morning. The music in the car was playing, and the occupants were chatting, unaware that a dark Chevrolet Impala SS was creeping up through the traffic to position itself directly beside them. The dark Chevrolet Impala pulled up to the right side of the Suburban, alongside the passenger door where Christopher Wallace was sitting. The driver of the Impala was a black male dressed in a blue suit and bow tie, a description that would later haunt investigators. He looked calm and professional, not like a typical street thug. He rolled down his window and looked directly at the legendary artist. There were no words exchanged, only a cold and calculated action. The driver raised a 9mm blue steel pistol and aimed it with precision. In the crowded streets surrounded by witnesses, the assassin prepared to execute a plan that had likely been in motion for days or weeks. 4 shots rang out in rapid succession, piercing the metal door of the Suburban. The bullets were not random spray. They were grouped tightly, suggesting a shooter with training and experience. The first bullet hit Christopher Wallace in the left forearm. The second hit him in the back, missing all vital organs. The third hit his left thigh. But the fourth bullet was the fatal blow, entering his right hip and tearing through his colon, liver, heart, and left lung before stopping in his left shoulder. The car filled with panic as the driver of the Suburban realized what had happened. The dark Impala sped off into the night, vanishing into the Los Angeles traffic before anyone could react. Chaos erupted inside the Suburban as friends tried to check on Christopher Wallace. He was slumped over and bleeding heavily. The driver gunned the engine, making a desperate U-turn across the median of Wilshire Boulevard. They raced toward Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, which was only a few miles away. The convoy broke traffic laws and sped through red lights in a frantic bid to save the life of the 24-year-old star. Sean Combs and the rest of the entourage followed close behind in shock and disbelief. The king of the rap game was fighting for his breath in the back of an SUV, while the city of Los Angeles slept on. At Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, doctors and nurses rushed to the emergency bay to receive the wounded artist. They performed an emergency thoracotomy in a desperate attempt to repair the damage to his heart and lungs. The medical team worked feverishly for 30 minutes trying to coax a rhythm back into his heart. Outside the hospital, the entourage gathered in tears, praying for a miracle. But the damage from the fourth bullet was too severe. At 1:15 in the morning, Christopher Wallace was pronounced dead. The news rippled out from the hospital to the streets and then to the world. The Notorious BIG was gone. The Los Angeles Police Department arrived at the scene of the shooting and the hospital, but the initial investigation was marred by confusion. The crime scene at Wilshire and Fairfax had not been immediately secured, allowing traffic to flow through and potentially destroying vital evidence. Witnesses had scattered in the panic, and the shooter had a significant head start. The police found 4 shell casings at the scene, identifying the ammunition as Gecko 9mm armor-piercing rounds. This was a rare type of ammunition manufactured in Germany and not commonly found on the streets. This detail suggested that this was not a random act of gang violence, but a professional hit. Detectives began to piece together a composite sketch of the shooter based on the descriptions provided by the entourage and witnesses. The man was described as an African-American male in his 20s with a medium build and a receding hairline, wearing a blue suit and bow tie. This description was unusual for a gang member, and pointed towards someone who might be associated with the Nation of Islam or a private security firm. The composite sketch was circulated, but no immediate arrests were made. The investigation seemed to stall right from the beginning, leading to frustration from the Wallace family and the public. Theories immediately began to circulate regarding who was responsible for the murder. The most prominent theory was that this was a direct retaliation for the murder of Tupac Shakur. The Southside Crips, a gang based in Compton, were heavily implicated in the rumors. It was alleged that the Crips had provided security for Bad Boy Records during their time in Los Angeles, and that a payment dispute had arisen. Others believed that Suge Knight, the head of Death Row Records, had orchestrated the hit from behind bars to settle the score for the death of his star artist. The streets were talking, but concrete evidence was hard to come by. Enter Russell Poole, a decorated detective with the Los Angeles Police Department, who was assigned to the Robbery Homicide Division. Poole was investigating the shooting of an off-duty officer named Kevin Gaines by another officer named Frank Liga. During this investigation, Poole began to uncover a web of corruption within the department that seemed to connect to the murder of Christopher Wallace. Poole discovered that several lapped officers were moonlighting as security for Death Row Records and had deep ties to the Blood Street gang. He began to suspect that the murder was not just a gang dispute, but a conspiracy involving law enforcement. Russell Poole focused his attention on an officer named David Mack, who had been arrested for robbing a bank of $700,000. Mack owned a black Chevrolet Impala, SS, the same type of car used in the murder. When Poole visited Mack in prison, he noticed that Mack had a shrine to Tupac Shakur in his cell. Poole also found that the first person to visit Mack in prison was a man named Amir Mohammed. Mohammed fit the description of the shooter in the blue suit and bow tie perfectly. Poole theorized that Suge Knight had hired David Mack and Amir Mohammed to carry out the hit. The theory proposed by Russell Poole was explosive. It implicated the Los Angeles Police Department in the murder of a world-famous celebrity. Poole believed that David Mack arranged the logistics and Amir Mohammed pulled the trigger. He found evidence that Mack and other corrupt officers were part of a secret subculture within the lap known as the Rampart Scandal. These officers operated like a gang, planting evidence, stealing money, and covering up crimes. However, whenever Poole tried to pursue these leads, he faced resistance from his superiors. He was told to drop the angle involving police officers and focus on other leads. The frustration felt by Russell Poole grew as his investigation was repeatedly stonewalled. He believed that the department was engaging in a cover-up to avoid a massive liability lawsuit and a public relations nightmare. The city of Los Angeles was already reeling from the Rodney King riots and the O.J. Simpson trial. The last thing they needed was a scandal involving cops assassinating a rap star. Poole eventually resigned from the force in protest, unable to continue working for a department that he believed was obstructing justice. He took his evidence to the Wallace family and became a key figure in their search for the truth. Voletta Wallace, the mother of Christopher Wallace, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles, based largely on the evidence uncovered by Russell Poole. The lawsuit alleged that the Lapt was responsible for the death of her son due to the actions of their rogue officers. The legal battle dragged on for years, keeping the case in the public eye. During the discovery phase of the trial, the city was accused of withholding thousands of documents related to the investigation. The judge even declared a mistrial at one point due to the hidden evidence. The family remained steadfast in their belief that the police were involved. Years later, in 2006, the Los Angeles Police Department opened a new task force to investigate the murder led by Detective Greg Kading. Kading took a different approach than Poole. He re-examined the case files and interviewed new witnesses. His investigation led him away from the police conspiracy theory and back toward the gang retaliation theory. Kading secured a confession from a woman named Dwayne Keith Davis, also known as Keith D. Keith D was a high-ranking member of the Southside Crips and the uncle of the man suspected of killing Tupac Shakur. In a taped confession, Keith D told Detective Kading that he was offered $1 million by P. Diddy to kill Tupac and Suge Knight. While this claim was controversial and unverified, Keith D also claimed that Suge Knight retaliated by hiring a hitman to kill Biggie. According to Kading, the man who pulled the trigger was Wardell Faust, also known as Poochie. Poochie was a mob Peru blood member and a close associate of Suge Knight. Kading believed that Poochie was paid $13,000 to carry out the murder. This theory contradicted the work of Russell Poole and cleared the lap of direct involvement. The problem with the theory involving Poochie was that he could not be prosecuted. Wardell Faust had been shot and killed in July 2003 while riding his motorcycle in Compton. With the alleged shooter dead and the other key conspirators refusing to talk, the district attorney felt there was not enough evidence to file charges against anyone else, including Suge Knight. The case was effectively stalled again. The task force was disbanded, and the findings were published in a book by Greg Kading, but no justice was served in a court of law. The Federal Bureau of Investigation also conducted a parallel investigation into the murder. In 2011, the FBI released their heavily redacted files on the case. The documents revealed that the Bureau had been investigating the possibility of police involvement and had surveillance logs from the night of the murder. The files mentioned the rare Gecko ammunition and the fact that it was found in the home of a New Jersey police officer who worked part-time for the record label. However, the FBI investigation also closed without any federal charges being filed, leaving the public with more documents but no answers. One of the biggest hurdles in solving the murder of Christopher Wallace was the culture of silence that permeated the music industry and the streets. Witnesses were terrified of retaliation. The reputation of Death Row Records for violence was legendary, and nobody wanted to be the next victim. Many people who were at the scene or had information simply refused to cooperate with the police. This code of silence meant that detectives were often working with hearsay and rumors rather than sworn testimony. The truth was locked away in the minds of people who valued their lives over justice. The physical evidence in the case has also been a subject of debate. The green GMC Suburban was repaired and sold back into the public. Before the investigation was complete, a massive blunder by the police. The bullet fragments were analyzed, but without a gun to match them, they were of limited use. The lack of DNA evidence or fingerprints on the shell casings meant that the case relied heavily on eyewitness identification, which is notoriously unreliable, especially at night in a chaotic situation. The window for gathering pristine forensic evidence closed very quickly in 1997. Despite the lack of a criminal conviction, the legacy of the Notorious B.I.G. has only grown stronger with time. He is widely regarded as one of the greatest rappers of all time. His storytelling ability, flow, and voice defined an era of hip-hop. The album Life After Death, released just weeks after his murder, became a diamond-certified record. Songs like Hypnotize and Mo Money, Mo Problems dominated the charts, serving as a bittersweet soundtrack to the tragedy. His image wearing a crown has become an iconic symbol of greatness and lost potential. The murder of Christopher Wallace marked the end of the violent coastal feud. The shock of losing two icons in 6 months forced the industry to take a step back and to escalate the rhetoric. Artists from New York and Los Angeles began to collaborate more frequently, and the lines between the coasts blurred. The tragedy served as a wake-up call that the lyrics had bled too far into reality. While the beef ended, the pain for the families remained. Voletta Wallace has never stopped fighting for justice for her son, keeping his memory alive through the Christopher Wallace Memorial Foundation. Today, the intersection of Wilshire and Fairfax looks much the same as it did in 1997, but the ghosts of that night still linger. Tour of Los Angeles crime scenes often stop there, and fans leave flowers and candles. The Petersen Automotive Museum stands as a silent witness to the crime. The case remains officially open but inactive. Every few years, a new documentary or book claims to have solved the case, but without a conviction in court, it remains one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in American history. The tragedy is compounded by the fact that Christopher Wallace was only 24 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him and was on the verge of expanding his empire beyond music. He was a father to 2 young children who had to grow up without him. The loss was personal for his family, but it was also a loss for the culture. We will never know what music he would have created or how he would have evolved as an artist. He remains frozen in time, forever young and forever the king of New York. In the end, the murder of the Notorious Big is a puzzle with missing pieces. Was it a corrupt police officer named David Mack? Was it a gang hitman named Pucci? Was it orchestrated by Suge Knight? Or was it something else entirely? The conflicting theories and the passage of time make it unlikely that the full truth will ever be universally accepted. The case stands as a dark reminder of a turbulent time in music history and a testament to a system that failed to deliver justice for one of its brightest stars.